Hello there, Seraphim17 once again. This is my Evil Within 2 Nightmare difficulty, no upgrades, no keys, and no damage walkthrough. This is Chapter 2, it's called Something's Not Quite Right, and we're going to be back in the familiar steps of Evil Within gameplay. You're going to hear a little bit of the Clair de Lune, you're going to see the mirrors that transform you to places, and you're going to be introduced to the concept of the room, which is this area that we're in right now. So the Crimson City Police Department area, which is Sebastian's office, is pretty much the new hub of this game. And inside there you can interact with various folders on the wall, you can talk to the cat and look at some like slideshows on a projector, and you can also do a variety of other things later on. One of the things that you will not be seeing in this walkthrough is I will not be partaking in those optional shooting gallery moments. So if anybody's played, Resident Evil 5 was one of the great examples of this, but Shinji Mikami and the people who work with him have a tendency of putting in these interesting shooting galleries, which is a nice little tongue-in-cheek optional section for people to just kind of have a bit of a break from the horror and the intensity, and you get to do some fun activities that can actually reward you in the game. So if you do those, you can get things from like gel, weapon parts, things like that, certain materials. It's pretty good, and I recommend that you do it. But to make this a little bit more difficult, because this is a challenge run for me so that it's a little bit more enjoyable, I've decided to abstain from it. But this is the first real section of gameplay for you as the player. So, as game-breaking as this is to say, please do not watch this if you haven't played this game or if you haven't done your first playthrough, because I'm effectively going to ruin the full game for you. The atmosphere and the experience of this title is the biggest appeal of the horror aspects. If you play games for gameplay, there's a lot of that as well, but that first playthrough where you don't know what you're doing, you don't know what's coming, and the atmosphere is really permeating every part, every step you take forward, every little sneaky piece of game design, that's the true splendour of this title. So with that considered, you are not in any danger at all in this entire sequence. Nothing will hurt you. There is only one threat of death, and it's through an introduction to cover. And funny story, I nearly die in this video. So I did a practice run of this game on Nightmare difficulty with very limited upgrades. I ended up only having the base weapons, didn't find the sniper rifle, didn't find the different pistols, didn't find the different shotguns. I had a sawn-off, I had a pistol, and I had pretty much the crossbow. That was the tools of the trade that I beat the game with. I upgraded Sebastian twice, so I could get the stab zombies on corners ability, and I used it quite a lot, and it was pretty strong. But of course I can't use it in this, so that's pretty unfortunate. I did not really upgrade any of my weapons other than a few toggles here and there. I upgraded some of the bolts. That was pretty much it. And I got through the game, and that was playing on the Xbox One, which is the console that I bought this on originally. So when it came to the guide, because I wanted to get it on PC as well, I was super stoked to get it. The better FOV, the better frame rate, the better visuals, the better performance, the load times are amazing on PC, it's way less punishing, but of course, I didn't do my first run through of this game using mouse and keyboard, which is what I'm using as you're watching right now. So, crouching, sprinting, and going into cover are buttons that I just didn't have on my brain at the time. And if you're curious of what they are by default, the spacebar is cover, the left control is crouch, and the left shift is run. So left crouch and left shift I'm well versed with because I've played quite a few games now on mouse and keyboard, so that came quite quickly. But confusing them up with the cover button as well led to a moment like this. Did you see that? So right there, I was very close to being seen, and it just goes to a cutscene where Stefano kills you. Nothing you can do if you do that. And the reason is, I was holding W as I was holding left, because I kind of do that with the keys. I move diagonally quite a lot, and it read the input to go forward, which made me rush out of cover. So be very careful with that, guys, if you're just starting with mouse and keyboard, because he moves incredibly fast. It's the fastest you'll ever see Sebastian move. Because I don't know if you've noticed, but not only is his movement speed in this game slower than the first game, I believe, but it also looks even goofier somehow. The standard walk on this game is kind of a joke. It's such a strange animation. It's like someone pretending to run in a dream where you can't run in dreams. It's so bizarre and profound and very frustrating. but it's just too goofy not to stare at. And then when you sprint, it's okay, and you'll be happy to know that they've actually made it so that Sebastian can sprint for the full duration of his stamina bar now, which in the previous Evil Within, he would get knackered about in the last 10 to 15% of it and start bending over, and it got you killed, and it led to a lot of frustrations. In this game, you can sprint for the full duration, but it comes with a penalty. The stamina regen in this title is brutal. It is absolutely just terrifying at time how slow your stamina comes back. And I don't know for sure the reasons to all of it, but it seems like when you're discovered and when you're fighting enemies, your stamina takes some kind of passive hit where it doesn't regenerate as quickly as it normally does. So you'll notice that when you start running away from enemies, you can only run away once and then you're fucked, because unless you've killed them, you cannot get your stamina back quickly. And a couple of ways to get it back is, if you stand still and you crouch, you seem to regenerate both HP and your stamina a little bit quicker, but if an enemy is aware of you, it still seems to conflict and make it so that your stamina comes back really slowly. So it leads you to certain things that I like to do. For instance, I like to move away from enemies without sprinting, and when I feel them getting close to me, I tap the sprint button, and it makes Sebastian do a little burst of speed, but it only takes a little bit of the bar, and then you can continue running normally, and then you can tap it again, and it's just lightly feathering it every so often to give you a little bit of a speed boost, to put something between you and the enemy, and then let it come back, and then you can sprint again. And it's not really an advanced technique, and it's not really that much more effective, but it can definitely help in certain fights, so it's something to bear in mind. And then now we have the first encounter with the enemy that rivals the Sadist. So you can just run straight past it, and if you sprint from now until the end of this corridor, you should have just enough stamina to get past all of these sequences. When you're sprinting, if you come to a door, Sebastian will automatically knock his way through it, and the same with cover. When you get to cover, you don't have to press the input. He will automatically vault. But you need to be aware here, guys. If you tell him to do the door or do the cover when you get to them while sprinting, you will interrupt the animation, Sebastian will freeze, and then he'll go into the next animation, and that transition can get you killed. It's happened to me a bunch of times. And similarly so in this vent. When the boss starts cutting the vent towards you, do not walk past it thinking it's just cinematic fluff slowing you down. It is actually a hurt box, and you will take damage, because this next sequence killed me, which I thought was hilarious. So, word to the wise, don't get too excited. But as I was saying, this entire sequence, you will not have to fight anything, and you will never be in danger outside of moments like this, brief interludes like this. That previous section that we ran through, all those houses, up to this point when that monster just attacked you, you were completely safe. The only thing that could kill you was Stefano. There was not really anything to pick up loot-wise, so you didn't have to explore. There was no real threats, there was no real dangers. It was just 100% psychological, 100% atmosphere. I crouch-walked my entire way through that first area of the game, and I loved every moment of it because it was terrifying, because I didn't know what was going to happen. But now I know that there's no enemies and it's safe, I can just sprint through it. And right now we get attacked by the boss again, and you just have to sprint away from him once again. So this is just introducing the concept of running away, and it's kind of interesting actually. There's not many sequences like this in this game. The first Evil Within had a lot of moments where you were being chased by kind of these indomitable figures that you couldn't really combat, and then this game only has a couple of those moments, and one of them is altogether dynamic and you don't even have to mess with it. But here is the mash the button to get the knife, slash the boss, and then Sebastian's going to push forward and we can get into the first part of gameplay. So new features in Evil Within 2 that potentially weren't in Evil Within 1. Oh, by the way, just then guys, when you come out of that cutscene, it injures you and it tells you about the healing of the game. So that is 100% unavoidable damage there. There's absolutely nothing I could have done to get rid of that, it's just part of the game. And the game does that twice. There's a quick time event that's guarding a pistol in the car park in the Chapter 3, and if you pick it up on Nightmare, there doesn't seem to be any human way of not taking damage during that quick time event. I used a controller to spin the analog, and I put my palm on the analog and I span it so crazy I was afraid I was going to damage it, and I still took damage. I tried AD mashing on my keyboard. I even tried plugging in my fight stick, putting the buttons to turbo and holding both of them, and I still couldn't get through it without taking damage, so I just avoided that section. But this is us going outside and being introduced to the first sequence of the game, which has a very definite Resident Evil 4 vibe, I felt. So when people talk about The Evil Within 2, they're going to throw around the word open world. And unfortunately, guys, it's an ignorant observation. This game is not open world. It's never seen open world. Open world is this thing that's polluting video games and making a lot of experiences that would be way better without it less enjoyable for a player like myself. This game is not open world. This game has 2 large environments. That's all they are, guys. For the most, this is a very linear title where you go from A to B, and there are 2 opportunities where you can decide to explore, but you do not have to. Even in those big open areas where you can explore all the town, you can literally follow the objective and do it in 5 minutes, and never venture in any house you don't have to do, and play it like a 100% linear game. However, if you do that, you're going to miss out on potentially the greatest design of this game, which is just how wonderfully dynamic and interesting moving through these large areas is. Because I don't know how they've done what they've done in this game, but they've managed to make it really interesting. So as you progress through the town, every time you enter a building, every time you exit a building, every time you transition between an area, it's almost like the world shifts, and subtle dynamic triggers are happening all the time. You go near a car, there might be somebody underneath it. You go near the car later on, they won't be. You know, you go through these moments and stuff like this happens where this lady goes into this room, I skip this cutscene, and here's the first encounter. So immediately, I run away looking for a bottle, because this is going to be, you know, the Evil Within 2 bottle edition. If you don't know how good the bottles are, I'm going to show you. But you don't have access to one in this building, so instead you have to shoot them. And I opted to shoot her leg so I could execute her, because if you shoot them in the leg a few times, they will fall down, and then you can stamp on their face. Thinking back, because her head's already compromised, it might have been a better idea to shoot her in the face. But I commit to the leg, and she takes a ton of shots. I'm not spamming the trigger here, guys, because I want the bullets to hit. I end up picking up green gel, which I do not need because I can't use it. And then there's going to be a second fight coming up with the guy coming through the door. If you're like me and you wasted a ton of bullets, go upstairs, there's going to be an extra stash of bullets and we can take him on. I was really hoping when I first played this that it was going to give you the option to jump out the window at the top as a massive homage to Resident Evil 4 at the beginning, but alas, I've still yet to find that window. But I'm going to be exploring as best as I can of the areas I want to go through, but I'm not going to be doing every zone, guys. And there is a choice coming up later on. Do you want to risk taking damage, wasting ammunition, and getting yourself into a spot of bother to find every scrap of everything to make sure that you have an easier time later on? Or are you just going to do the bare minimum and just get on with the game? It's 100% up to you. You don't have to, you know, like, you can do a mixture of both. It's not essential, but it is fun and it can help. But there's me kicking the door, hoping it would knock him down and I could step on his head. It doesn't work like that in this game, which is unfortunate. So now I start shooting him in the leg. This guy goes down pretty quick. Some of those bullets you'd think would make him flinch, but they don't. And this pretty much sums up the game right now. There you go. That is The Evil Within 2 in one GIF. Did you see how janky that was and how goofy that was? That is the ultimate metaphor for this game. This is a really, really fun game. It has a lot of improvements over the first game, but it is still completely goofy and janky as hell. And there is stuff in it that just doesn't make sense, that doesn't work, that frustrates and obfuscates and just pisses me off to no end. But I still think this game is amazing, and I think you're in for a treat if you haven't experienced it. But you might be wondering, Chris, how are you turning so fast? And it's 100% mouse and keyboard, baby. This will be pretty much my first project where I'm using mouse and keyboard, and I can't even begin to tell you how much it feels like I'm cheating. Like, I've always been a person who believes that you can get good at anything that you do, and that's really true. You know, look at all my walkthroughs on YouTube. All of those were with analogs. Some of those third-person shooters, first-person shooters, my aim was really good. I'd sharpened it and practiced it and tightened it up to a point where I could do those difficulties and I looked quite proficient. But I ain't shit on what I am with a mouse and keyboard, and I'm not even good with mouse and keyboard. But the accuracy in this game, it's night and day different. I felt confident in every single fight I went into, because I knew that I was faster and I was sharper and I could aim better than anybody else when it comes to the enemies in the game, because that's how powerful it makes you feel. And if you're somebody who's on the fence about transitioning over to PC gaming, or if you've got a big PC and you've never given mouse and keyboard a try, please do so. It's tricky at first, it feels weird on your brain, it takes some figuring out, it doesn't make sense, you're not a pianist or a drummer, you've got to separate your brain and everything, but once you do it, and once you put in a bit of time, it's just like holding a controller. The only difference is now, your aim is 1,000,000 times better. And you're going to see me do things in this walkthrough that might be difficult for you to translate on the sticks. And you might find it easy, and that's awesome, because everything I am doing here can be recreated on the console. But you might not have the snap that some of the experiences that you're going to see here do. But the good news is, the strategies that I impart and the techniques are 100% translatable. But here is the stealth. So, when you crouch in this game, you make almost no noise. Technically, you still make some noise because there are certain enemies that can turn around when you get close to them, but I'm almost certain that's to do with their AI more than the sound. And this game doesn't mess around with any of that lightly tilt the stick bullshit that I hate, so that's a massive bonus. But the concept here is quite simple. This first sequence we're going to kill a bunch of Haunted, which in this game I believe they're called the Lost. So, these enemies have set patterns when it comes to their behaviours. They'll kind of go where they want to go in a general area, but the great part about them is they have to initiate animations that tell you a lot about what they're going to do. So him who's eating the body, he's never going to move unless you get in front of him, and then he might move, or unless you make a sound. The guy in front of me, do you notice how he just looked to the left, then he looked to the right? Now he's going to turn around. How did I know that? Because he always does that after he does that, look to the left and look to the right. But what he chooses to do is up to him. These enemies have about 3 or 4 behavioural patterns, and depending on which they are will depend on how they act. Look, he did the left and the right, he's going to turn around. Wait for it. He turned to the side a little bit, that's another one of his patterns. It all depends on what they do, and there's interims between them, and then they're going to shift direction. So he walks away from me now, he's probably going to go into an animation, and which does he do? Does he do left and right? He's just going to get stabbed, isn't he? Well, never mind, so he's dead. But when you are crouched, you will execute anything from behind with the knife. This will not work if they're aware. You have to hit them in the face with a bottle to get an instant kill when they're aware of you. This guy eating the body, he will not do anything, so he's a free kill. The guys over there, there's a lot of them, so you can take them out if you want to, but another important decision to make throughout this campaign is every single time you fight an enemy, they will generally drop goo, and you can't use it. They will sometimes drop ammunition, very rarely, they'll sometimes drop gunpowder, but for the most, killing enemies is not essential. If you can get past them without conflict, it's probably the smarter choice. But as I was saying about the AI, we're going to talk a lot more about that later on, because what happens with the enemies is they cycle through AI patterns, and if you know which pattern it is, you know how they're going to move, and you know when your openings to stab them are. And if they ever do that where they stop, and then they look to the left, and then they look to the right, that is the best option to stab them, because you know at the end of it they're probably going to turn around, but it's so long you can get behind them and stab them. And this right here is a legitimate problem with this game. For some reason, they've decided to let us mantle things, which is a good idea, but they've let you mantle things you would never want to mantle. There's almost no situation in this game where you will ever want to stand on top of a car. I can think of one, and that's a truck, so technically it's not even the same thing. But we knock the door, there's a little vignette cutscene here, and we're going to be introduced to a character called O'Neill. And then from this moment onwards, we're going to be moving into the larger expanse of the Evil Within. This next mission is going to be a very long one, because I'm going to get you a shotgun, I'm going to get you a new pistol, I'm going to show you a couple of places where we can get some loot and various things, and then we're going to do the mission objective, and then we're going to take on the first difficult fight, which is a combat sequence against a special type of enemy that crawls on the ground, but it is incredibly dangerous. So look forward to that, folks. But thank you for watching the videos. I hope you're excited for this project. I hope it helps if you're going for some kind of campaign and you're having trouble. And I will see you in those areas that give you trouble. You take care now.